Have you ever caught yourself crossing your arms right after the person across from you crossed theirs? Or noticed that after spending an afternoon with a friend, you started talking a little like them, laughing a little like them, even walking a little like them? Most people brush this off as nothing. A coincidence. A small, meaningless quirk of being around someone. But here's the strange part. It's not random at all. It's happening to you constantly, in almost every conversation you have, and you are almost never aware of it while it's happening. Think about it. Right now, without you choosing it, your brain is scanning the people around you and quietly rehearsing their movements, their tone, their expressions. Not because you're weak-willed or unoriginal, because this is one of the oldest survival mechanisms your mind has. Long before humans had language, before we had complex thought, we had to know instantly who was safe and who was dangerous. And one of the fastest ways to know that was to feel what the other person was feeling. So the brain developed a shortcut. Instead of analyzing someone from a distance, it started copying them internally, almost like trying them on, to understand them from the inside. This is where it gets interesting. Neuroscientists have identified something called mirror neurons, brain cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you simply watch someone else perform it. So when you watch someone smile, a small part of your brain fires as though you are smiling too. When you watch someone wince in pain, your brain flickers with a faint echo of that same pain. Some psychologists believe this is a foundational piece of how empathy developed in humans. Not as some abstract moral idea we were taught, but as something wired into the architecture of the brain itself. Now, here's what nobody talks about. This mirroring isn't limited to big obvious things like laughing when someone laughs. It happens in tiny, almost invisible ways. Researchers have found that when two people are having a conversation, their posture, their speech rhythm, even their breathing can start to sync up. This is sometimes called the chameleon effect. And what's fascinating is that people who mirror each other more during a conversation tend to report liking each other more afterward, even when neither person consciously noticed the mirroring at all. Imagine sitting across from someone on a first date. You lean forward, and a few seconds later, they lean forward too. You take a sip of your drink, and without thinking, they reach for theirs. Neither of you planned this. Neither of you would even remember doing it if someone pointed it out. But underneath the surface, your nervous systems are quietly negotiating closeness, testing whether this is someone worth trusting, worth connecting with. This is your brain's way of saying, we are in sync. This feels safe. But wait, if this is happening all the time, why don't we notice it? Here's where it becomes fascinating. This kind of imitation happens below the level of conscious awareness on purpose. If you had to consciously think about every micro-expression, every shift in posture, every change in tone from every person around you, your mind would be completely overwhelmed within minutes. So the brain automates it. It runs in the background, like breathing, like blinking, freeing up your conscious mind to focus on the actual words being spoken. Now think about how this shapes something much bigger than a single conversation. Think about who you've become. Have you noticed how people who grow up in the same household often end up with similar phrases, similar reactions to stress, even similar senses of humor? That's not just genetics. A huge part of that is years of unconscious mirroring. Children are especially powerful imitators. Long before a child understands language, they are already copying facial expressions, tone of voice, even emotional reactions from the people around them. This is one possible explanation for why children raised in anxious households often become anxious adults. Not necessarily because they were taught anxiety directly, but because their nervous system spent years quietly mirroring a nervous system that was already anxious. Here's what's interesting. This same mechanism doesn't disappear when we grow up. It just becomes more subtle. Have you ever joined a new job and, within a few weeks, started using phrases your coworkers use? or started dressing slightly differently after spending time around a new friend group. Some psychologists call this social contagion, the tendency for behaviors, moods, and even beliefs to spread from person to person, almost like a subtle current. You don't consciously decide to adopt a new way of speaking. It seeps in gradually, shaped by repeated exposure to the people you spend the most time with. But here's the part that might genuinely surprise you. This isn't just about behavior. It's about emotion, too. There's a concept called emotional contagion, and it explains something most people have felt but never had language for. Have you ever walked into a room where someone was clearly stressed, and within minutes, without anyone saying a word, you started to feel that same tension in your own body? Or sat with a friend who was excited about something and found your own mood lifting simply from being near them? Emotions move between people the same way a yawn moves through a room, silently, automatically, almost contagiously. Researchers studying this have found that we don't just interpret other people's emotions intellectually. We actually simulate them internally, activating similar patterns in our own nervous system as if the emotion belonged to us. This might be one reason why spending time around chronically negative people can leave you feeling drained. Even if nothing negative happened to you directly, your nervous system was quietly mirroring theirs the entire time. Now here's where it gets even stranger. This unconscious copying doesn't just shape how you act around others. It shapes your very sense of identity. Think about the person you are today. How much of your personality, your opinions, your taste in music, your sense of humor was actually built from scratch by you alone? And how much of it was absorbed, piece by piece, from the people you spent the most time with growing up? Some psychologists argue that identity itself is less like a fixed, solid thing you were born with, and more like a mosaic, built from years of unconscious imitation, slowly stitched together until it feels like it was always yours. This isn't something to feel unsettled by. In fact, it might be one of the most human things about you. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that the human ability to imitate so precisely is actually one of the reasons our species became so successful. Unlike most animals, humans don't have to individually rediscover fire, or language, or tools. We copy. We observe someone doing something useful, and instead of starting from zero, we absorb it instantly. This ability to imitate with incredible accuracy allowed knowledge, culture, and skill to be passed down and multiplied across generations, far faster than any single person could ever learn alone. But here's the twist that makes this even more personal. If imitation shapes so much of who you are, then some of your deepest preferences, the music that moves you, the values you hold, the way you express love or anger, may not be entirely your own invention. They may be inherited fragments of the people who shaped your early life, echoing quietly inside you, dressed up as personal choice. Does that feel unsettling? For some people it does, at first. But there's another way to look at it. If so much of your personality was formed through connection with others, then you were never as isolated as you might have felt. Every person who ever influenced you, even in small unconscious ways, left a piece of themselves inside you. In a strange way, this means you're not just one person. You're a quiet collection of everyone who shaped you, filtered through your own unique experiences until it became something entirely new. Something that is finally, undeniably you. Here's another layer to this. Have you ever noticed that when you're with certain people, you feel more confident, more talkative, more alive? And with others you feel smaller, quieter, more guarded? This might be more than just personal chemistry. Some psychologists suggest that we don't just mirror behavior. We mirror the version of ourselves that another person seems to expect from us. Around someone who treats you as intelligent and capable, you might unconsciously rise to meet that expectation. Around someone who treats you with suspicion or dismissiveness, you might unconsciously shrink to match it. This is sometimes discussed in relation to something psychologists call the looking glass self, The idea that a large part of how we see ourselves comes from how we imagine others see us. Now here's where the emotional weight of all this really lands. If you've ever felt like a different person in different relationships, more anxious in one, more playful in another, more guarded around certain family members, this might explain why. You weren't imagining it. You weren't being fake. You were responding to an ancient, automatic process, one that has been running quietly in the background every relationship you've ever had. What if the people who make you feel the most like yourself aren't doing anything magical? What if they've simply, unconsciously, mirrored back the parts of you that you needed someone to see? And what if the people who make you feel small have been mirroring something else entirely, something that was never really about you at all? This changes the way we might think about connection. Maybe the reason certain friendships feel effortless isn't chemistry in some mysterious sense. Maybe it's two nervous systems finding an easy rhythm together, synchronizing naturally without either person forcing it. And maybe the reason some relationships always feel exhausting isn't because you're doing something wrong. It's because your nervous systems are working against each other instead of with each other, constantly out of sync, constantly straining to mirror something that never quite lines up. Here's the deeper meaning underneath all of this. We like to think of ourselves as separate, self-contained individuals, each making our own choices, forming our own personalities in isolation. But the truth is far more interconnected than that. From the moment you were born, your brain has been quietly absorbing the people around you, borrowing pieces of their expressions, their emotions, their rhythms, and weaving them into the fabric of who you are. You are not simply an individual who occasionally interacts with others. You are, in a very real sense, shaped into existence by every person who has ever spent meaningful time near you. And maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe that's something almost beautiful, because it means connection isn't just something that happens to you. It's something that becomes you. Every laugh you've unconsciously borrowed, every phrase you've unknowingly picked up, every emotional rhythm you've absorbed from someone you loved, all of it lives inside you now, quietly shaping how you move through the world. So the next time you catch yourself crossing your arms just after someone else did, or noticing that your voice has taken on a rhythm eerily similar to a close friend's, don't brush it off as nothing. It's a small window into something much larger. A reminder that you were never meant to become who you are entirely alone. But if imitation runs this deep, if it shapes your habits, your emotions, even your identity without your permission, a bigger question starts to surface. If so much of what you think, want, and feel has been quietly absorbed from other people, how much of your decision-making is actually your own? That question leads somewhere even more unsettling, into the psychology of why humans are so much easier to influence than they think, and why the illusion of free choice might be one of the mind's most convincing tricks of all.